one of the reasons why black men in particular are starting to look at Donald Trump, because they're like, you know what? At least my pockets were good when he was president. The other stuff, that's other stuff.
Well, I think
I was making more money and my money was going further.
But I think they feel like that because of the stimulus checks and the PPP loans. But you got to look at what had to happen in order for that money to go out. Like you had to have a freaking pandemic where millions of people died.
But no.
That's not going to happen again.
But
I hope not.
Oh, no, I don't want it to happen either. But I want to be clear on this. Wages adjusted for inflation before the COVID-19 pandemic was at the highest level for Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, white Americans in the history of the country. The wage gap, which gets talked about so much in our politics, the wage gap was actually decreasing under Donald Trump's presidency. And then the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and then COVID was just such a disaster for everybody. And now we have a situation where we have massive inflation in the country. Inflation today is like a little over 3% year over year. But when you take in the totality of these price increases, prices are up well over 20% in our country the last 4 years. That's real life stuff everybody's dealing with.
Yes, sir. So check it out. Recently, Representative Byron Donalds has gone viral for his interview on The Breakfast Club, where he touched on economics, the presidential campaign, and reparations. Now, y'all know on this channel, I'm a big advocate for reparations, so I thought this might be a conversation that's worth breaking down, seeing as Byron Donalds is a Republican, and a lot of Republican conservative platforms have been hailing this guy as a potential future presidential candidate. People have been saying that he, instead of J.D. Vance, should have been Donald Trump's running mate as vice president. So people are really credentializing him and saying that he's a legitimate representative of the black conservatives, right? So I think this is an interesting conversation. Let's get into it. Specifically, his stance on reparations. Check this out.
Don't believe in reparations.
Oh, wow. Why did y'all play the rest of the clip, man? I was on fire during that one. No,
because Byron, I think it's important for people to get your yays and nays, just like you have to do on the House floor. You have to take a up or down vote on an issue. You took a down vote on this, and you haven't supported HR 40. So if you want to talk about the complexities of reparations, whether or not there should be a study in this country, you again have said that this country is not racist, and even though it has a dark past, it doesn't sound like you think it has a dark present. You have not sponsored that bill. You haven't co-sponsored that bill. Why not?
Well, a couple things. One, that's why I wish you played the clip, because I actually went into all the detail, but I will. A couple things is, all right, how many people in the United States today are actually descendants of slave owners? Forget descendants of slaves. Let's hold that to the side. Descendants of slave owners. You've had massive immigration into the United States over the last 150 years. So now you're going to say that people who immigrated to the United States, who are not descendants of slave owners, were not descendants of that trade, now they're going to be responsible for paying that out going forward.
Now there's more to his response here, but I want to pause it just for a moment and respond to each point that he makes as to why he does not support reparations. Now, to give you some context, this is what some would refer to as a tether. He is not a foundational Black American. He is an immigrant who came here whose parents came here from the Bahamas, who has latched on to Black society, acting as our quote unquote representative, and yet is pushing policies that are diametrically opposed to our best interests. In this clip, which I just played, first off, he says, how many people in America today are descendants of slave owners? So he's not contesting that there is a significant portion of foundational Black Americans who descended from slaves. He's not contesting that. He's saying that there are other people who didn't descend from slave owners who would now have to be on the hook to pay reparations. And to him, I would respond, you damn skippy. Listen, if you came to America as an immigrant, you came looking, especially if you came post this 1960s, you came here looking for opportunity. You came here looking to take advantage of the wealth that America accumulated based off of our free labor.
My mother's Jamaican. My father's Panamanian. You have a lot of Black people in this country who are not descendants of the American slave trade. So I already know off top, there's a lot of black people in America who aren't going to be able to get that kind of benefit or get reparations.
Okay, so the first argument Ronald McDonald makes against reparations is there are a lot of people who descended from non-slave owners who would be on the hook to pay reparations. To that I would respond, foundational black Americans never did anything to the Native Americans, and yet our tax dollars go to paying their reparations. Foundational black Americans did not put the Japanese people in internment camps, yet our tax dollars went to their reparations. That's just how reparations work. The taxpayers are on the hook for the actions of the U.S. government, and this U.S. government has done specific harms to our specific and unique group. Ronald McDonald doesn't even argue against that. He just says he doesn't like it because Johnny-come-latelys would be on the hook just like everyone else. That's his first argument. His second argument is there are a lot of melanated people who come from Africa and the Caribbean who would not qualify for reparations. To that, I would say, well, this isn't your claim. Foundational black Americans aren't going to CARICOM and saying, hey, you guys don't deserve reparations because foundational black Americans aren't included. No, if you have a claim, that is the claim just or is it unjust? If you have a legitimate claim, just because you don't qualify, that doesn't mean the rest of us have to go without. If we have a class action lawsuit against a product and everyone who was here using the product before 2020 is eligible to receive some type of payout because of this faulty product, just because you got here in 2024 and you don't qualify for the payout, that doesn't mean the rest of us don't have a legitimate claim.
Well, most people who are for reparations, they feel like it should go to what they call foundational black Americans anyway.
And I agree with that point. But I'm just saying, I'm just laying out, these are the reasons for why I'm no. So now
you do support reparations for what Leonard just deemed as, quote, foundational black Americans?
No, I don't.
No.
But I want to explain
Okay.
that. I want to explain that. And so that's why you have a lot of people saying, okay, well, then what are we going to do? And so my view is that what you do going forward is why you have to have wholesale changes in economic, medical policy, et cetera, so that the ability to access various parts of our economy and grow in our economy work for everybody, including people in our country who are, quote unquote, foundationally black. Now, let me translate to what's happened in California.
So instead of supporting reparations, which would directly affect foundational black Americans, lifting many of us out of poverty, he says he would support a lift all program. You know the phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats. The problem with that philosophy is if we're at the bottom of the boat, that rising tide lifting the boat doesn't help us because we're still at the bottom. That's the problem with these tethers supposedly representing us. They don't have our interests at heart. All skin folk ain't kinfolk. And here's the really insidious part. Some of the things that he says, I agree with. You got to understand, foundational black Americans, we are a really conservative group by nature. And a lot of us are waking up to the fact that these Democrats are supporting us on a surface level only. But when it comes time to really lay down the line, draw the line in the sand, and hold the line as far as passing bills and passing legislation that will support us, the Democrats are nowhere to be found.
So there was a bill in California for reparations. The California Assembly, which is massively Democrat, they didn't move that bill. They could have moved that bill. When they were asked why they weren't moving that bill, they tucked tail and turned and ran away. They didn't even have the guts to actually answer that question. So I'm here with y'all. I'll tell you why I'm a no. But you have Democrats who will say they're for something, but when it comes time to actually do it, they're not there for you.
Oh man, so you made it this far in the video, but you haven't yet hit the thumbs up button? What are you waiting on? Do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button. It's free and it boosts us in the algorithm to get the message out to a larger audience. So support the foundational black Americans putting in the work. Hit the thumbs up button. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to smash the subscribe button for more content just like this, talking about a wide range of topics, but reparations is one that's always in the forefront. So be sure to subscribe and come on back for more. Now I'm going to get into some closing thoughts, and be sure to stick around to the end of the video for some bonus footage I'm sure you'll find interesting. This delineation movement is really necessary, and truth be told, is long overdue in America. See, years ago, we as foundational Black Americans were all operating on a Pan-Africanist mentality. We assumed that all of these foreign groups that are melanated would come to America and serve as backup, and we would all be on one accord as Black people in America. But now that years have passed and we've seen these immigrant groups come into political power, such as Ronald McDonald here, whose parents come from the Caribbean, and they get into these positions of political power, and the philosophies and policies that they support are diametrically opposed to our interests. Before, I think we as foundational Black Americans didn't have the political acumen to really take account how insidious and how diabolical these other groups could be. They blend in with us and pretend, hey, we're all African Americans, we're all in this group together. But when you sit down and look at it, in the words of 21st century philosopher Kendrick Lamar, they not like us. Hey, that's just what I think. And I don't want to discredit everything that this guy has to say, because we as foundational Black Americans, again, are very conservative. His stance on the border, for example, I would agree with. His stance as far as some of the critiques he has about Kamala Harris, economics, hey, we're all on the same page. But when it comes to specific policies for us, for foundational Black Americans, these tethers, they just do not care about our needs. That's what it looks like to me. Leave it in the comment section. Tell me what you think. Does this guy get a pass or no? Leave it in the comment section, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Correct.
Well, a couple of things. Let's talk about the parties historically.
Yes, let's talk about it.
The Republican Party was the party of emancipation. It has always been the party that stood for the freeing of slaves and for civil rights. If you go back to the Civil Rights Acts, and it's not just the 64 Act, there were actually 5 other civil rights acts before 1964, massively, overwhelmingly supported by the Republican Party. It was Democrats that were holding up those. When the 64 Act was going, and before it went into law, the filibuster in the United States Senate was led by Democrat senators of the United States Senate. All those Democratic senators that filibustered the 1964 Civil Rights Act, they remained Democrat senators. They didn't switch to become Republican senators. Robert Byrd was a lawyer for the Klan. He was a Democrat senator. He was the dean of the Democratic Senate until the day he died. He didn't change parties. Now, I will acknowledge that Richard Nixon, in response to just political moves of that era, he started going into the South to trying to go find the conservative Democrat votes in the South. You call them Dixiecrats or whatever, to find conservative Democrat voters in the South in order to be able to, frankly, win the presidential election when he was running during that era. He did do that. Where I'm highly critical of the Republican Party, my colleagues will tell you, is that the Republican Party in the 60s really didn't even try to get Black votes, didn't try to court Black voters, didn't try to talk about Black issues, didn't try to engage Black people. And so as I come along, my politics are about policy, not about personalities. I believe in policies that help people thrive and succeed. Where I tell people today in the Republican Party is you have Black voters who are sitting back and saying, okay, now wait a minute. I've heard these speeches before. I've heard these talking points before, but nothing in my life is really changing. If you're trying to go court Black voters, you actually have to go and engage Black people.
I done ran up all these bands up in hand and made like 5 bands a day. I was broke, came up with a plan, now I'm the man, there ain't no stopping me. I done ran up all these bands up in hand and made like 5 bands a day. I was broke, came up with a plan, now I'm the man, there ain't no stopping me. It ain't no stopping me. Got better bands, I'ma run it up, it ain't no stopping me.